A single vow can bind more than two lives. It can awaken secrets long buried beneath duty and silence. On the eve of a union forged from desperation, a trembling heart braces for a night without tenderness. Yet behind the quiet composure of a powerful man lies a truth fierce enough to unravel everything she believes about sacrifice, loyalty, and the price of survival. As shadows gather around a marriage neither wished for, one revelation threatens to turn dread into destiny, and fear into something far more dangerous. Before we begin, tell me, where in the world are you listening from? And what do you love most about historical romances? In the soft glow of dawn, filtering through the lace curtains of her modest village home in the heart of the Cotswolds, Eleanor Hawthorne stood before the cracked mirror, her hands trembling as she adjusted the high-necked gown of fine muslin that clung to her slender frame. The fabric, a pale ivory borrowed from her aunt, whispered against her skin like a reluctant promise. At 21, with chestnut curls pinned beneath a simple bonnet and eyes the color of storm-tossed seas, she looked every inch the dutiful daughter of a fallen gentry family, but inside, her heart pounded a frantic rhythm, echoing the distant toll of the church bells that would soon summon her to a fate she dreaded. The air in the small parlour carried the scent of fresh-baked bread from the kitchen, where her mother bustled about, her face lined with quiet desperation. The Hawthorne estate had crumbled under debts left by Eleanor's late father, a once prosperous landowner whose gambling had stripped them of everything but pride. Now that pride was all they had left to barter. The marriage to Lord Edward Blackwood, the Marquess of Ashford, was no fairy tale spun from ballrooms and stolen glances. It was a contract, cold and unyielding as the stone walls of his grand manor overlooking the honey-coloured hills. Eleanor pressed a hand to her chest, feeling the rapid flutter beneath the lace fichu. "What have I agreed to?" she whispered to her reflection, the words barely audible over the chirp of sparrows outside. She had met the Marquess only twice, formal calls in the drawing room, where his dark eyes had lingered on her with an intensity that unsettled rather than warmed. Tall and broad-shouldered, with raven hair swept back from a face chiseled by years of command, Edward Blackwood was a man of 30, whispered about in the village taverns as both saviour and enigma. His title commanded respect, his fortune could restore her family's name, but his heart, that remained a locked vault, rumours suggesting a past shadowed by loss, a wife taken too soon by illness, leaving him armoured against affection. The door creaked open, and her younger sister Clara slipped in, her freckled face alight with forced cheer. At 18, Clara still dreamed of dances and suitors, untouched by the harsh realities that now bound them. "Ellie, you look like an angel," she said, twirling a ribbon in her fingers. "Lord Ashford will be enchanted. Imagine it, life in a great house, silk gowns, and no more mending hems by candlelight." Eleanor forced a smile, but it cracked at the edges. Enchanted. The word tasted bitter. Their betrothal had been arranged by her uncle, a distant relation with ties to the Marquess's solicitors. A dowry of sorts. Her hand in exchange for clearing the Hawthorne debts and securing a portion for Clara's future. No courtship, no whispers of love. Just the stark reality of a wedding night looming like a storm cloud, where duty would demand what her soul recoiled from. A union devoid of tenderness, a bed shared with a stranger who viewed her as little more than a necessary acquisition. She turned from the mirror, smoothing her skirts with hands that refused to still. Downstairs, the carriage waited, its wheels crunching on the gravel path lined with blooming foxgloves. Her mother appeared, eyes red-rimmed but resolute, pressing a small locket into Eleanor's palm. "Your father's," she murmured. "Wear it close. It will remind you of home." As they stepped into the morning light, the village of Willowbrook stirred awake. Cottages of golden stone nestled among rolling green hills, sheep dotting the meadows like scattered clouds. Neighbours gathered at the garden gate, murmuring well-wishes that felt more like condolences. "A fine match, Miss Hawthorne," old Mrs. Greer called, her voice laced with pity. "The Marquess is a good man, they say. Stern, but fair." Stern. The word echoed in Eleanor's mind as the carriage jolted forward, carrying her toward the ancient church atop the hill. Fair? What fairness was there in surrendering her dreams for survival? She had once fancied a life of quiet joys, tending the family gardens, perhaps marrying for companionship, not commerce. Now, as the spire came into view, piercing the sky like a judgmental finger, terror gripped her. The wedding night awaited, a ritual of obligation in the shadowed chambers of Ashford Manor. Would he be gentle or distant, cruel or merely indifferent? Tears pricked her eyes and she blinked them back, clutching the locket until it bit into her skin. The church doors loomed ahead, flanked by yew trees, heavy with the weight of centuries. Inside, the pews would fill with villagers and a smattering of gentry, all eyes on her as she walked the aisle toward an uncertain abyss. But as the carriage slowed, a sudden gust of wind whipped through the open window, carrying the faint scent of wild roses from the hedgerows. For a fleeting moment, Eleanor wondered if fate held more than despair, if beneath the Marquess's guarded facade lay a truth that could shatter her fears. Little did she know, the vows they were about to exchange concealed a secret far deeper than debts or duty. A revelation that would turn dread into destiny, binding them not in chains, but in a love forged from hidden fires. If this tale of heartache and hidden truths has you hooked already, hit that like button to show your support and subscribe to the channel for more gripping Regency romances. Drop a comment below telling us what city and country you're watching from. We love hearing from you all over the world. The carriage halted before the weathered oak doors of St. Mary's Church, their iron hinges groaning as if protesting the union within. Eleanor descended on unsteady legs, the gravel biting through her thin slippers like tiny accusations. Her mother linked arms with her, a silent anchor amid the gathering crowd. Villagers from Willowbrook lined the path, their faces a mix of curiosity and sympathy. Farmers in rough woolen coats, maids with starched aprons, all whispering behind gloved hands. The Cotswolds air hung crisp, laced with the earthy tang of dew-kissed meadows and the faint smoke from distant chimneys. Inside, the nave echoed with the low hum of anticipation. Sunlight slanted through stained glass windows, painting the flagstone floor in hues of crimson and sapphire. The pews creaked as guests settled, local squires with their wives, adorned in bombazine gowns and lace shawls. Eleanor's uncle, stern-faced in his best waistcoat, nodding approval from the front row. Clara sat beside their mother, clutching a handkerchief, her eyes wide with a blend of awe and envy. Lord Edward Blackwood waited at the altar, his silhouette tall and imposing against the carved reredos. He wore a tailored coat of midnight blue superfine, silver buttons glinting like distant stars, his cravat knotted with precise elegance. No smile softened his features, instead a mask of composure, eyes shadowed beneath straight brows. As Eleanor approached on her uncle's arm, the organ swelled into a somber hymn, notes vibrating through her bones. She kept her gaze lowered, focusing on the hem of her gown brushing the stones. Each step, a surrender. The vicar, Reverend Hargrove, intoned the vows with gravelly solemnity. "Wilt thou have this man to thy wedded husband?" Eleanor's voice emerged faint, a whisper swallowed by the vaulted ceiling. "I will." Edward's response rang clear, steady as the tolling bell outside. Rings exchanged, his a plain gold band, hers engraved with the Ashford crest, heavy on her finger like a shackle. The kiss was brief, his lips cool and formal against hers, no spark, only the press of duty. As they emerged into the sunlight, cheers erupted from the crowd. Rice pelted them like gentle rain, and well-wishers surged forward. "God bless the bride," a ruddy-cheeked blacksmith called. Edward inclined his head, murmuring thanks, his hand light on Eleanor's elbow, guiding, not claiming. The wedding breakfast followed in the church hall, a modest affair of cold meats, syllabub and bride cake, served on borrowed linens. Laughter bubbled, but Eleanor tasted only ash. She sat beside her new husband at the head table, their chairs close, yet worlds apart. Clara chattered across from them, describing imagined grandeur. "The manor must have gardens like Eden, Ellie. Will you write every detail?" Edward glanced at her, his voice low and measured. "Ashford Manor awaits, Miss Hawthorne. Mrs. Blackwood now. It is adequate." No warmth laced his words, only fact. Eleanor nodded, forcing conversation about the weather, the harvest yields, safe topics that skirted the chasm between them. Her mother watched from afar, pride warring with worry in her lined face. The debts were settled. A solicitor had confirmed it that morning, papers signed in the parson's study. Clara's portion secured, yet freedom felt like chains reforged. By afternoon, the carriage bore them away from Willowbrook, the village shrinking to a cluster of golden cottages amid undulating hills. Sheep grazed unhurriedly on slopes dotted with wild thyme, the landscape a tapestry of green and gold under a vast sky. Eleanor peered out the window, heart aching for the familiar. Edward sat opposite, unfolding a newspaper, his silence a wall. No overtures, no shared glances. She twisted the locket beneath her fichu, its chain a tether to lost innocence. Ashford Manor crested the horizon as dusk gathered, a sprawling edifice of Bath stone, its facade softened by ivy and flanked by ancient oaks. Turrets pierced the twilight, windows glowing like watchful eyes. Servants lined the entrance, bowing as the carriage rolled to a stop. The housekeeper, Mrs. Thorne, a stout woman in crisp black with a starched cap, curtsied deeply. "Welcome home, my lord. My lady, all is prepared." The interior enveloped them in shadowed opulence, polished oak panelling, tapestries depicting hunts and heraldry, the air scented with beeswax and lavender from polished floors. Footmen in livery relieved them of cloaks, while a maid led Eleanor upstairs. "The Marchioness's chambers, milady," the girl murmured, eyes downcast. The room was vast, a four-poster bed draped in damask, a fire crackling in the marble hearth. Adjoining it, through a discreet door, lay Edward's suite, unseen, yet oppressively near. Dinner was served in the dining hall, candlelight flickering over silver and crystal. Alone at the long table, they faced each other across polished mahogany, venison in claret sauce, asparagus in butter, a claret that warmed without comfort. Conversation limped, remarks on the estate's tenants, the upcoming assizes in the county seat. Edward's manner remained courteous, his dark eyes appraising her like a portrait under scrutiny. "You must find the manor daunting after Willowbrook," he said at last, fork pausing midway. "It is." "Grand," Eleanor replied, voice steady despite the knot in her throat. "A new world entirely." She studied him then, searching for cracks in the armor, the faint scar along his jaw, perhaps from a riding mishap, the way his fingers drummed subtly on the stem of his glass, betraying unrest. He nodded, gaze drifting to the fire. "Grand, yes, but homes carry their burdens." The words hung, vague yet weighted, hinting at shadows unspoken. As maids cleared the plates, he rose, offering his arm. "Shall we retire?" Her pulse thundered. The wedding night loomed, a threshold crossed in dread. They ascended the grand staircase, portraits of stern ancestors gazing down. At her door he paused, hand on the latch. "Rest well, Eleanor. Tomorrow brings duties." No advance, no demand, only a bow and withdrawal to his rooms. Relief flooded her, mingled with confusion. She undressed by firelight, the gown pooling like shed skin, slipping into a lawn nightgown. The bed swallowed her, vast and cold, but as sleep evaded, a soft knock echoed from the adjoining door. Edward's voice filtered through, muffled. "Eleanor, there is something you must know, before dawn claims us both." Her breath caught. What secret stirred in the night, poised to unravel the fragile peace? Eleanor's heart slammed against her ribs as she sat bolt upright in the vast bed, the sheets tangling around her legs like vines. The fire had dwindled to embers, casting flickering shadows across the damask walls. Moonlight seeped through the heavy curtains, turning the room into a realm of half-truths. She clutched the counterpane, her nightgown damp with sudden sweat. "Come in!" she called, her voice a fragile thread in the silence. The door creaked open, and Edward stepped through, still dressed in his evening shirt and breeches, the fabric rumpled as if sleep had eluded him too. His hair fell dishevelled over his forehead, and in the low light his face seemed etched with weariness rather than the stern resolve she'd seen earlier. He carried a single candle, its flame dancing like a hesitant confession. "Forgive the intrusion," he said, his tone low, almost apologetic, "but this cannot wait until morning." She drew her knees up, shielding herself with the bedclothes. "What is it, my lord? If it's about our marriage—" Her words faltered, heat rising to her cheeks. The wedding night hung unspoken between them, a spectre she'd half expected him to invoke. Edward set the candle on the mantel, the glow illuminating a small leather-bound book in his hand, a journal, its cover worn from years of handling. He did not sit, pacing instead to the window, his back to her for a moment. "Our marriage is not what you believe, Eleanor, not entirely." He turned, eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that pinned her in place. "I did not choose you for debts or dowries alone. There is a threat to Ashford, to everything I've built, and you are the key to averting it." Confusion swirled in her mind, sharper than fear. She slid from the bed, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders, her bare feet cold on the rug. "A threat? From whom? Speak plainly, Edward. After today, I deserve no less." He exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "My late wife's family, the Hargraves. They contest her will, claiming Ashford Manor and the estates should revert to them. It's a web of old grudges and forged documents. My solicitors uncovered it months ago. To counter their claim, I needed an heir, legitimate, beyond dispute. But more than that." He paused, the words catching like thorns. "The Hargraves have spies in the county. Rumours swirl that they'll sabotage the line if I act alone. Marrying you, from a respectable though modest family, strengthens my position. It shows stability, continuity. But the real reason, the one that binds me to this deception, is a letter from my wife's deathbed. She begged me to protect the estate for our shared legacy, not let it fall to those vultures." Eleanor's breath hitched. A letter? An heir? The marriage, then, was a shield, not just a transaction, yet it twisted the knife deeper. She was a pawn in a greater game, her body the vessel for his salvation. "So I am to bear your child, solidify your claim, while you—" "What? Endure me as a necessary burden?" Anger flickered, hot and unbidden. She stepped closer, the candlelight gilding her features. "You could have told me before the vows, before the village watched me pledge myself in ignorance." Edward's jaw tightened, a muscle ticking there. "Would you have said yes, with your family's ruin at stake?" He closed the distance, his presence filling the room, warm and commanding. "I am not the monster the whispers paint, Eleanor. My wife, Amelia. She was taken by fever 3 years past. I loved her fiercely, but grief armored me. This union was meant to be practical, yes. But seeing you today, your grace amid the storm, I wondered if fate offered more. She searched his face, the scar on his jaw catching the light, a reminder of vulnerabilities hidden. Hesitation gripped her. To refuse now meant unraveling everything. The debts would return like wolves to the door, Clara's future shattered, her mother destitute. Social ruin loomed, a jilted bride. Whispers of scandal rippling through Willowbrook's taverns and drawing rooms. The gentry would shun them, doors closed forever. Yet acceptance chained her to this labyrinth of intrigue, where trust was a luxury she might never afford. I need time, she whispered, sinking onto the edge of the bed. This changes the rules of our world, Edward, from wife to weapon in your war. He knelt before her, unexpectedly, his hand hovering near hers without touching. The Hargraves move swiftly. Their patriarch, Lord Reginald, arrives in the county tomorrow for the assizes. He'll press his suit publicly, drag our names through the mud if I falter. Allies are few. My steward, Mr. Ellis, stands firm, but the local magistrate leans their way. You must decide by dawn. Stand with me, or we face the fallout alone. The weight pressed down, the room closing in. Outside an owl hooted, a mournful call echoing her turmoil. Eleanor glanced at the adjoining door, now a portal to alliance or isolation. The locket at her throat felt heavier, her father's silent counsel. Refusal's cost clawed at her, eviction from the manor, return to a hollowed home, Clara's dreams dust. But yielding meant stepping into shadows, navigating a marriage laced with secrets and enemies. As the candle sputtered, Edward rose, his silhouette framed by the dying flames. Sleep, if you can. At first light, we face the new day, and whatever choice you make. He retreated to his rooms, the latch clicking like a verdict. Eleanor lay back, staring at the canopy above, her mind a tempest. The status quo had shattered. No longer just a bride in name, she teetered on the brink of a battle where love might be the ultimate casualty. But as dawn's first blush crept under the curtains, a resolve stirred. Perhaps in this rupture lay her own power, a chance to rewrite the script of duty into destiny. Yet, as footsteps echoed in the hall below, servants stirring early, an urgent knock at the manor's outer gate shattered the fragile quiet. A messenger from the Hargraves? The game had begun, forcing her hand before the sun fully rose. The first rays of sun pierced the manor's tall windows as Eleanor hurried down the grand staircase, her morning gown of soft cambric rustling against the polished banisters. Sleep had been a fleeting visitor, chased away by Edward's revelations and the urgent knock that had echoed through the halls at dawn. Now, in the entrance hall, a liveried messenger stood fidgeting, his boots muddy from the ride. He bowed low, extending a sealed missive stamped with the Hargrave crest, a snarling fox amid thorny vines. Edward appeared from his study, his face set in grim lines, already dressed for the day in a frock coat of charcoal grey. "What news?" he demanded, snatching the letter before the man could speak. The messenger cleared his throat. "From Lord Reginald Hargrave, my lord. He bids you and the new Marchioness to tea at Greystone Hall this afternoon, to discuss matters of the estate. The assizes approach, and he wishes to extend courtesies." Edward's eyes narrowed as he broke the seal, scanning the elegant script. A muscle in his jaw clenched. Courtesy? More like a gauntlet thrown. He dismissed the man with a curt nod and turned to Eleanor, who hovered at the foot of the stairs, her hands clasped tightly. "The Hargraves waste no time. Greystone is their seat, 10 miles hence. We must go, show a united front." Refusal would fuel their whispers. Eleanor's pulse quickened. United. After last night's upheaval, the word felt like a fragile bridge over a chasm. She nodded, steeling herself. "I will prepare. If this is the battle, I stand ready." By midday, their carriage rattled along the winding lanes of the Cotswolds, past hedgerows bursting with late summer blooms and fields where labourers paused to watch the crested vehicle pass. Eleanor sat beside Edward, the space between them charged with unspoken words. He had not pressed her decision from the night. Instead, a quiet resolve had settled over breakfast, where he'd spoken of the manor's ledgers and tenant disputes, drawing her into the rhythm of his world. Now, as the landscape rolled by, honeystone villages nestled in valleys, sheep bleating on distant slopes, she stole glances at him. His profile was sharp against the window, the scar on his jaw a subtle reminder of battles past. Greystone Hall emerged from a copse of ancient beeches, its facade a stern grey contrast to Ashford's warm stone. The drive curved through manicured gardens, where fountains tinkled like mocking laughter. As they alighted, a footman in Hargrave livery, crimson trimmed with gold, led them inside. The air within carried the heavy scent of beeswax and old books, the halls lined with portraits of stern-faced ancestors, their eyes following like spies. Lord Reginald Hargrave awaited in the drawing-room, a portly man of 50 with a powdered wig and a smile that did not reach his pale blue eyes. He rose from a wing-back chair, bowing with exaggerated flourish. "Lord Ashford and the charming Lady Eleanor, what a delight to welcome the newlyweds. Do sit, tea is laid." Two women flanked him. His sister, Lady Beatrice, thin and sharp-featured in a gown of puce silk, her lace mitts hiding bony hands, and a distant cousin, Miss Lydia, young and simpering, her curls artfully dishevelled. The room buzzed with false warmth, silver teapots steaming, plates of seed cake and buttered scones arranged on a low table, but beneath it tension coiled like smoke. Edward guided Eleanor to a settee, his hand brushing her elbow, a fleeting touch, warm and steady, that sent a quiet spark through her. She met his gaze for a heartbeat, a shared silence, conveying more than words. "We face this together." It was the first crack in the wall between them, a micro-gesture of alliance amid the fray. "Such a hasty wedding," Lady Beatrice remarked, pouring tea with deliberate slowness. Her voice honeyed venom. "One hears the Hawthorns were pressed by circumstance. Debts, was it? How fortunate Lord Ashford proved so generous." Eleanor's cheeks burned, but she lifted her chin, accepting the cup with grace. The subtle humiliation stung, class friction laid bare, her family's fall painted as desperation. Edward's fingers tightened on his saucer, but his tone remained even. "Generosity born of practicality, Lady Beatrice. The union benefits all estates in the county." Lord Reginald chuckled, a low rumble. "Indeed, though whispers abound of old claims resurfacing. Amelia's will, such a tragedy her passing. The Hargraves have rights, you know. Blood ties run deep." His eyes flicked to Eleanor, appraising. "And now a new bride, charming but untested in our circles. Tell us, Lady Eleanor, do you play the pianoforte? We must hear your talents." The challenge hung, a test of her place. Eleanor hesitated, then rose, drawn to the instrument in the corner, a gleaming harpsichord, its keys ivory and ebony. As her fingers touched them, a small brooch slipped from her fichu. The locket's chain had tangled, but this was her mother's gift, a simple pearl on gold, symbol of Hawthorn resilience. It fell to the rug with a soft clink, unnoticed by all but Edward, who retrieved it swiftly, pressing it back into her palm. His thumb grazed her skin, a hidden reassurance that steadied her trembling. She played then, a gentle air from Handel's suites, notes flowing like a stream over stones. The room fell silent, the Hargraves' faces a mask of polite boredom. But Lady Beatrice's lips thinned. As the final chord faded, applause trickled, sparse, obligatory. "Quite adequate," Lord Reginald said, leaning forward. "For a village girl. Ashford Manor will polish you, no doubt." The barb landed, rejection measured in condescension, acceptance withheld like a withheld invitation. Edward interjected smoothly. Her touch rivals any in London salons, a rare gift. His defense was minimal, voiced without heat, yet it warmed Eleanor like sunlight breaking clouds. In that moment, amid the teacups and veiled barbs, a small advance bloomed. A look exchanged over the rim of her cup, his dark eyes holding hers with unspoken promise. As they departed, the carriage wheels crunching on gravel, Edward exhaled. They probe for weakness. Reginald watches from the shadows, no doubt plotting his next move at the assizes. Eleanor nodded, the brooch now pinned securely, its pearl a talisman against the fray. We held our ground, but the county will hear of this tea, of the village bride and her adequate heirs. Indeed, by evening, as they returned to Ashford, a note arrived from the local gazette's correspondent, a discreet inquiry about the harmonious gathering at Greystone. Whispers would spread, a visible consequence rippling through society, testing their fragile bond further. But in the quiet of the carriage, Edward's hand found hers briefly, squeezing once. The shadows lengthened, and with them the antagonist's reach. Rain lashed the carriage windows with relentless fury as thunder rolled across the Cotswold sky, turning the winding road into a river of mud. Eleanor gripped the seat's edge, the vehicle jolting over ruts that mimicked her churning thoughts. They had set out from Ashford Manor that morning for a necessary visit to the county seat, Edward to consult with allies before the assizes, her to accompany as the visible face of their union. But the storm had ambushed them midway, forcing the driver to seek shelter at a remote inn tucked against a hillside, its thatched roof groaning under the deluge. Inside the cramped private parlour, a fire crackled in the grate, casting wavering light over the worn oak table and mismatched chairs. The innkeeper, a ruddy-faced man named Potts, had apologized profusely for the lack of better rooms. The storm had stranded other travellers, filling the place to bursting. Edward shrugged off his soaked greatcoat, hanging it by the hearth, while Eleanor unwound her damp shawl, her gown clinging uncomfortably to her skin. The air smelled of damp wool, peat smoke, and the faint tang of ale from the taproom below. "We'll wait it out," Edward said, his voice steady amid the wind's howl outside. He poured 2 glasses of brandy from a decanter Potts had left, the amber liquid glinting like captured sunset. "The road will clear by dawn." Eleanor accepted the glass, her fingers brushing his, another fleeting contact warmer than the fire's heat. She sipped, the burn steadying her nerves. The tea at Greystone lingered like a bruise, Lady Beatrice's barbs echoing in her mind. Yet here, confined by the storm's rage, the world narrowed to this room, to him. No servants hovered, no prying eyes from the village or Hargrave spies, just the patter of rain and the crackle of flames. Edward settled into the chair opposite, his shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms corded from years of riding and estate work. For the first time, he seemed less the Marquess, more a man unarmoured. "You played well today," he murmured, swirling his glass. "Not just the harpsichord. You held your own against their thorns." She met his gaze, the brandy loosening the knot in her chest. It felt like walking a blade's edge. "They see me as an interloper, a hawthorn upstart in your world." His eyes darkened, not with anger, but something deeper, regret, perhaps. "They see weakness to exploit. But you are no weakness, Eleanor." He set his glass down, leaning forward. The fire popped, sending sparks dancing. "I should have warned you sooner. About the Hargraves, the will. All of it." The confession hung, pulling her in. She traced the rim of her glass, the storm's fury mirroring the one building within. "Tell me about her. Amelia. Not the version from rumours, but the truth." Edward hesitated, his jaw tightening as if the words were stones too heavy to lift. Then slowly, he rose and retrieved a small object from his coat pocket, a miniature portrait no larger than her palm, framed in tarnished silver. He handed it to her, the painted face of a young woman gazing out, fair-haired with soft blue eyes and a gentle smile. She was light in my darkness. We met at a house party in Bath, danced under chandeliers that seemed to hold the stars, married within the year, but the fever came swift 2 winters ago, took her in days. Eleanor's thumb brushed the frame, the cool metal grounding her. The portrait was the anchor, unveiling layers she'd only glimpsed, the grief that armored him, the duty that chained him now. You loved her deeply. I see it in how you guard Ashford, like it's her legacy you're fighting for. He nodded, sinking back into his chair, the lines around his eyes deepening in the firelight. Guilt eats at me still. I was away on estate business when she fell ill. Rode through the night to reach her, but too late. Her last words were of the manor, of keeping it from those who would strip it bare. The Hargraves, Reginald's kin, coveted it even then, whispering of entailments and old feuds. Amelia's dowry secured it for us, but her will left it to me outright. They've forged claims, bribed witnesses. Marrying again was my solicitor's counsel, to produce an heir, to show the line endures. Tears pricked Eleanor's eyes, not from pity, but understanding. His past wasn't cold indifference. It was a wound festering, driving him to this calculated union. She set the portrait on the table, its subject watching them like a silent mediator. And me? Am I just the means to that end? A vessel for your heir, nothing more? Edward's hand reached across, covering hers fully this time, not a brush, but a hold, firm and warm. The touch sent a quiet tremor through her, shifting the air between them, warming it from duty's chill to something tentative, alive. At first, yes, practicality demanded it, but last night, revealing the truth. And today, seeing you face them unafraid. It stirred something I thought buried. You have strength, Eleanor, compassion, qualities Amelia cherished in others. Perhaps this storm confines us not by chance, but to forge trust. She didn't pull away, her pulse steadying under his palm. The rain drummed on, a curtain sealing their world. In that moment, a tacit promise formed. No grand vows, just the press of skin, the shared weight of secrets. He humanized before her, not the stern Marquess, but a widower scarred by loss, bound by honor, yet yearning for connection. She saw her own reflections, duty to family mirroring his to legacy, binding them closer without words. A knock shattered the intimacy, the door swinging open to reveal Potts, drenched and breathless. "Beggin' pardon, my lord, my lady. A rider just arrived. Urgent missive for you, my lord. From the county seat, Hargrave's man, by the look." Edward released her hand, the warmth lingering like an echo. He took the sealed letter, breaking it open by firelight. His face paled as he read, the portrait forgotten beside the brandy. Damn them, Reginald's escalated. Claims a witness to the will's forgery. Demands a private hearing before the assizes. And he's sent word to the magistrate, painting our marriage as rushed collusion to thwart justice. Eleanor's heart sank, the fragile bridge they'd built trembling under the blow. The antagonist's shadow lengthened, a signal of movement that chilled the room's newfound warmth. Trust flickered, but the storm outside raged on, mirroring the gathering tempest within their fragile alliance. As thunder cracked anew, she wondered if this news would pull them apart before they could truly unite. The storm's fury had ebbed to a sullen drizzle by the time their carriage splashed through the mud-churned lanes back to Ashford Manor, but the chill in Eleanor's veins lingered like frost on the windows. Edward sat rigid opposite her, the crumpled missive from the Hargraves clutched in his fist. The portrait of Amelia lay tucked in his pocket now, a silent witness to the trust they'd glimpsed in the inn's firelight. Yet that fragile warmth curdled under the weight of Reginald's words. Accusations of forgery, a so-called witness ready to swear the will was tainted, and their marriage branded a desperate ploy to silence claims. Eleanor studied Edward's profile, the line of his jaw etched sharper in the dim interior. Rain streaked the glass, blurring the rolling hills into smears of green. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice cutting the heavy silence. "This hearing, it's a trap, isn't it? To drag us before the assizes and unravel everything." He folded the letter with deliberate care, his knuckles white. "A frontal assault, yes. Reginald's no fool. He's rallied the magistrate, old Sir Bertram, who owes the Hargraves favours from some ancient land dispute. If this witness testifies, it questions not just the will, but our union's legitimacy. The courts could freeze the estate, demand separation until resolved. Your family's debts. They'd resurface like weeds after a fire." Her stomach twisted. Separation. The word echoed the isolation she'd fled in Willowbrook, but amplified. Public scrutiny, whispers turning to shouts in the county's drawing rooms. She pressed a hand to her midriff, the brooch from her mother a cold pin against her gown. And me, they'd paint me as complicit, a scheming bride bought for the title. Edward's gaze met hers, dark and stormy. "They'll try, but we fight it. Ellis, my steward, swears loyalty. He'll unearth counter-evidence. We present a united front at the hearing tomorrow." His tone brooked no doubt, yet beneath it lurked the fracture, their nascent bond tested before it could root. Dawn broke grey and sodden over Ashford Manor, the servants' hushed voices carrying through the halls like omens. Eleanor, dressed in a simple round gown of slate wool, its high neckline a shield against the day's barbs, her chestnut hair coiled severely at her nape. No time for powder or pearls. Practicality armoured her now. Edward waited in the breakfast parlour, maps of estate boundaries spread before him, his face haggard from a night poring over ledgers. "The hearing's at the county court in Chipping Norton," he said, rising as she entered. "Public, unfortunately. The Hargraves will make a spectacle." The drive dragged, the carriage wheels churning mud that splattered the panels like accusations. Chipping Norton buzzed with early market crowds, farmers haggling over wool, maids with baskets of eggs, but the courthouse loomed apart, its Georgian facade stern under leaden skies. As they alighted, heads turned, a cluster of gentry in tricorn hats and silk pelisses, villagers craning for gossip. Whispers rippled. The new Marchioness. Hargrave's challenge. Scandal brewing. Inside the oak-panelled chamber, the air hung thick with pipe smoke and tension. Sir Bertram presided from the bench, his wig askew, eyes darting to Reginald Hargrave, who lounged at a side table with Lady Beatrice, their faces smug as cats with cream. The antagonist had ascended, his attack frontal and vicious. A wiry man in threadbare solicitor's robes stepped forward as witness, swearing on a battered Bible. "I saw Lord Ashford dictate the will himself, my lord," the fellow rasped, sweat beading on his brow. "Amelia too ill to sign. He forged her mark to keep the dowry. Hargraves have rights, blood over convenience." Gasps echoed. Eleanor's cheeks flamed as eyes bored into her, the village bride, now tainted by association. Edward's hand found her arm under the table, a steadying grip, but doubt flickered in his eyes. Had the man been bribed? Sabotage? Plain as the forged quill in his tale, Sir Bertram cleared his throat. "Grave charges? Lady Eleanor, your marriage? Hasty, some say. Does it not smack of collusion to thwart this claim?" She rose, voice trembling but clear. "No, sir. It was born of honour, to secure a legacy." But the damage seeped in. Murmurs swelled, allies shifting uncomfortably. Mr. Ellis, summoned as counter-witness, faltered under cross-examination, admitting he'd been away during the will's drafting. Loss of support, tangible as the gavel's crack. Reginald leaned forward, his smile a blade. "See? The Marquess marries in haste, beds a stranger to birth and heir and dodge justice. The court must intervene, separate the couple, sequester the estate until truth emerges." Separate. The word struck like a blow, rupturing the equilibrium. Edward surged to his feet. "Lies, the will stands. My solicitors will prove it." But Sir Bertram banged the gavel, adjourning with a provisional order. No intimacy, no estate decisions, until full trial. The alliance cracked, publicly, their union now suspect. Eleanor's reputation scarred as the gold-digging outsider. Outside, rain resumed, soaking the crowd as they fled. Edward pulled her into the carriage, his face thunderous. "This breaks us if we yield, but the order—" "It isolates you, Eleanor. Back to your mother's cottage, perhaps, under chaperone. I can't protect you here." Isolation clawed at her, fall from grace, the manor's warmth barred, their budding trust severed by legal chains, the point of no return. She'd crossed into this war, but now retreat meant ruin for all. Tears blurred the window as Willowbrook's spire neared. "What choice do we have? Fight from afar?" He gripped her hand, fierce. "We endure, but Reginald's won this round. Your status falls, our bond phrase." The carriage halted at her family's door, her mother rushing out, face ashen from rumours already flown. Edward bowed stiffly. "Until the trial. Stay strong." As he drove away, the mud swallowing the wheels, Eleanor stepped inside, the home once humble, now a prison of exile. Whispers would chase her, jilted, tainted. Yet in the quiet parlour, clutching the brooch, resolve hardened. The separation was emotional exile, but it forged her agency. Reginald's ultimatum loomed: yield the estate, or watch their world burn. But that night, as thunder rumbled anew, a furtive note slipped under the door, from an unexpected ally, hinting at Hargrave's deeper sabotage. The battle raged on, pulling her deeper into the fray. Eleanor's fingers trembled as she unfolded the note in the dim light of her mother's parlour, the paper crisp and anonymous, scented faintly with ink and haste. Rain pattered against the diamond-paned windows of the Willowbrook cottage, a relentless drumbeat, mirroring the ache in her chest. The separation order from the hearing hung over her like a shroud, barred from Ashford Manor, confined here under her mother's watchful eye, her reputation fraying with every whisper that slithered through the village. Edward's parting words echoed, "Endure." But endurance felt like surrender, and she refused to yield. The note was brief, scrawled in a hurried hand. "The Hargrave's witness lies. Seek the diary in the old oak at the manor's east boundary. Truth awaits. A friend." No signature, only a hastily drawn fox. Reginald's crest perhaps turned against him. Her pulse quickened. A trap or salvation? She glanced at her mother, dozing by the hearth, exhaustion etching deeper lines into her face. Clara had retreated to her room, humming a tuneless melody to mask her worry. No time for debate. At dusk, Eleanor slipped out, her hooded cloak blending with the gathering shadows, skirts muddied by the path to Ashford's edge. The old oak loomed like a sentinel, its gnarled branches clawing the sky. Heart pounding, she pressed against the trunk, fingers probing the hollow at its base. There, tucked in waxed cloth, a slim volume, leather-bound and faded, Amelia's diary. Eleanor's breath caught as she cracked it open under the faint moonlight. Pages yellowed with secrets, entries flowed in a delicate script, confessions of love for Edward, fears of illness. And then, the revelation. Reginald presses me to alter the will, claims Hargrave blood entitles them to Ashford, but Edward has toiled to restore it. I name him sole heir, free of their greed. He knows not of this clause, forged in my heart alone. Further pages seared her, accounts of Reginald's manipulation, bribes to servants, threats veiled as family concern. A ledger insert detailed falsified debts. Hargrave funds funneled to sway the magistrate, proof irrefutable, letters pinned within, one from a bribed clerk recanting under duress. The structural truth unfolded, not mere grudge, but a calculated plot to seize the estate through lies and coercion. Reginald wasn't avenging a sister-in-law, he was a predator, exploiting grief for gain. Indignation surged in Eleanor, hot and righteous, the villain unmasked, his smug face at the hearing now a grotesque mask of deceit. She clutched the diary to her chest, resolve igniting like flint on steel. No more porn. Dawn found her at the County Gazette's modest offices in Chipping Norton. The editor, a bespectacled man named Mr. Hale, with ink-stained fingers and a sceptical brow, staring as she laid the volume before him. "Publish this," she demanded, voice steady despite the quiver in her hands. The Hargraves scheme exposed, Amelia's words, the ledgers, evidence of forgery, not just claims. Hale leaned forward, eyes widening at the pages. "Lady Eleanor, this could topple them. But the risk, Reginald's influence runs deep, retaliation swift." "Let it," she replied, chin lifted. "I act for justice, for Ashford's legacy, and my own." Proactive public, her agency bloomed, a letter drafted on the spot, signed with her new title, calling for a special assembly of gentry at the village hall. Word spread like wildfire, the Marchioness demands truth. Villagers murmured in taverns, squires in their studies. Social perception shifted, from tainted bride to avenger. Her initiative a beacon piercing the fog of scandal. By midday, Edward arrived at the cottage, his horse lathered from a hard ride, face etched with urgency. He dismounted, striding to the door where she waited, the diary in her apron pocket. "Eleanor, what madness is this?" Hale sent word. "You've stirred the hornet's nest." She met his gaze, unflinching. "No madness. Truth." Read it. She pressed the volume into his hands, watching as his eyes scanned the pages, color draining, then flushing with fury. The portrait of Amelia peeked from his coat, a twin talisman. "She protected you, us, from Reginald's web. Not coldness drove you, Edward, but guilt, duty to her memory. I see it now. We're allies in this, equals." He closed the book, his free hand capturing hers. The touch contained yet profound, trust weaving tighter than passion's rush. "You braved the oak alone. Foolish, brave woman." A peak of hope crested, their reapproximation, shoulders brushing as they stood on the threshold, his thumb tracing her knuckles in silent gratitude. The wall of reserve cracked further, revealing the man beneath, vulnerable, grateful, eyes softening with something akin to admiration. But the valley plunged swift. A rider thundered up the lane, bearing Reginald's seal. "Lord Hargrave summons you both to the assembly tonight," the man barked, eyes darting. "He'll counter your lies publicly. Refuse, and the magistrate doubles the order, full sequestration." Edward's grip tightened, indignation peaking in Eleanor's chest. The villain's response a greater threat, his sabotage escalating to open war. Yet she squeezed back, resolve shared. "We go. Together." As evening fell, the village hall beckoned, lanterns flickering like wary eyes, the decisive assembly poised to erupt. The lanterns cast wavering pools of light across the village hall's weathered beams, turning the assembled faces into a mosaic of shadows and suspicion. Willowbrook's modest assembly room, usually host to harvest suppers and parish notices, now brimmed with the county's gentry, squires in embroidered waistcoats, their wives in rustling silks, farmers and villagers crammed along the walls, eyes wide with the scent of scandal. The air hung heavy with pipe smoke and anticipation, the murmur of voices rising like a gathering storm. Eleanor stood at Edward's side near the raised dais, her hand lightly on his arm, the diary's weight in her reticule a secret talisman. The brooch gleamed at her throat, a pearl of defiance. Reginald Hargrave dominated the front row, his portly frame squeezed into a chair, Lady Beatrice at his elbow like a venomous shadow. He rose as the local magistrate, Sir Bertram, called the assembly to order, banging a gavel on a makeshift podium. "This gathering addresses claims on Ashford Manor, Sir Bertram intoned, his voice quavering under the weight of so many stares. Lord Hargrave alleges forgery in the late Lady Amelia's will. Lady Eleanor Blackwood counters with evidence. Let truth prevail. Reginald stepped forward first, his smile a predator's gleam, unfolding a sheaf of papers with theatrical flourish, a dossier of yellow documents, seals cracked like broken promises. Gentlemen, ladies, he boomed, pacing the dais like a barrister in court. Behold proof of deceit. This witness affidavit, sworn by a former Ashford clerk, details how Lord Edward coerced the will's signing. And this, a letter from Amelia herself, dated days before her death, revoking prior bequests in favour of Hargrave blood. Gasps rippled through the crowd. He thrust the papers high, the false letter fluttering like a poisoned flag. Their hasty marriage, a sham to birth an heir and bury the truth. I call Mr. Wilkins, the clerk, to affirm. The wiry man from the hearing shuffled forward, eyes darting, bought testimony gleaming in his sweaty brow. Aye, my Lord Hargrave speaks true. I saw the Marquess's hand on the quill. Forgery, plain. Eleanor's stomach knotted, the sabotage landing like a blow. Reginald's final thrust, twisting Amelia's memory into a weapon, branding her and Edward as frauds before the community. Whispers swelled. Shame on the Blackwoods. Village girl leading him astray. Her cheeks burned, humiliation coiling tight, but Edward's grip on her elbow steadied her. No retreat now. This public forum demanded their stand, a moral choice etched in the eyes of Willowbrook and beyond. She squeezed his arm, a silent signal, and stepped onto the dais as Sir Bertram nodded. Heart thundering, she drew the diary from her reticule, its leather warm from her touch. Lies built on greed, she declared, voice clear and resonant, cutting through the hush. Amelia's own words expose you, Lord Reginald. She opened the volume, pages whispering like vindicated ghosts, reading aloud. Reginald presses me to alter the will, but Edward has toiled. I name him sole heir. Murmurs turned to stunned silence. She revealed the pinned letters, the recanting clerk's confession, ledgers of Hargrave bribes funneled through shadowed accounts. Your witness? She turned to Wilkins, eyes piercing. Bought with coin from these very pages. And that letter you flaunt? A forgery, ink fresh as yesterday's rain, penned by your sister's hand to mimic Amelia's? The crowd stirred, faces shifting from doubt to outrage. Edward joined her, unfolding counter-affidavits from loyal tenants, Mr. Ellis stepping forward as key witness, his voice booming, I've managed Ashford 15 years, no coercion. Amelia signed in sound mind, with me and the vicar present. Strategy unfolded like a well-laid trap. Eleanor's initiative, the diary's proof, allies mobilized in the shadows. Reginald's face purpled, his dossier crumbling in his fists as Sir Bertram snatched the false letter, sniffing it like a hound on a scent. Ink's too new! Counterfeit! Chaos erupted, villagers shouting, Thief! At Reginald, squires rising in protest, Lady Beatrice hissing retreats. Reginald lunged for the diary, but Edward blocked him, voice like tempered steel. Your plot ends here. Greed for Ashford blinds you no more. The magistrate banged his gavel, declaring the Hargrave claims void, the will upheld. Cheers thundered, the community reorienting in a rush, from scorned outsiders to heroes, Eleanor's grace earning nods of respect, her transformation from humiliated bride to resolute marchioness sealing their place. Reginald slunk back, defeated, his empire of lies shattered before the hall's watchful eyes. Exile loomed for him, whispers of disgraced removal to London debtors, his influence evaporated like morning mist. Victory surged, euphoric and cathartic, the air electric with justice's triumph. Eleanor turned to Edward amid the applause, their gazes locking in shared relief, a tacit commitment blooming in the press of his hand over hers. Intimate, unspoken, the storm's silence wrapping them in quiet promise. If this heart-pounding climax has you cheering for Eleanor and Edward, please subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any other exciting stories like this one. As the assembly dispersed into the night, lanterns bobbing like fireflies, a hush settled over the hall. Edward drew Eleanor aside into the shadowed alcove, his breath warm against her ear. "You were magnificent," he murmured, fingers lingering on hers. The world outside faded, leaving only the echo of their united stand, and the deeper bond it forged, waiting to unfold. The morning after the assembly dawned clear and golden over the Cotswolds, sunlight spilling across Ashford Manor's manicured lawns like a benediction long withheld. Eleanor stood at the library window, her fingers tracing the cool glass, watching as Edward conferred with Mr. Ellis in the gravel courtyard below. The steward's face, usually etched with quiet worry, now beamed with unaccustomed vigor. The night's victory lingered in the air, a tangible shift, as if the very stones of the estate breathed easier. Sir Bertram's provisional ruling had rippled outward swiftly. By first light, a courier from the county court arrived with formal papers, the Hargrave claims dissolved, Amelia's will affirmed in full. Reginald faced sanctions harsher than exile, his forged documents deemed perjury, his bribes exposed in the ledgers Eleanor had revealed. The magistrate, his own impartiality now questioned, ordered restitution. Reginald's Greystone Hall mortgaged to repay Ashford's contested funds, his title stripped of influence in local assizes. Whispers flew through Willowbrook. The old fox humbled, packed off to a modest London lodging with Lady Beatrice in tow, her sharp tongue silenced by shame. No more shadows. The antagonist's fall was complete. His prestige crumbled like dry earth underfoot. Eleanor turned as Edward entered, his boots echoing softly on the Persian rug. He carried a small velvet box, his dark eyes alight with a warmth she'd glimpsed only in stolen moments. "It's done," he said, voice low and steady. "The solicitors confirm it. The estate is secure. No more threats, no lingering claims." He paused, stepping closer, the space between them shrinking to mere inches. "And you, Eleanor, you made it so, not as a pawn, but as the force that turned the tide." She searched his face. The scar along his jaw softened in the morning light, no longer a mark of hidden battles, but of a man reborn. Her own transformation mirrored his. Voice, once hesitant, now carried authority. Her compassion, a quiet leadership that had rallied villagers and gentry alike. "We did it together," she replied, her hand finding his. "Equals in this, Edward. No debts, no duties binding us now." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring, unadorned, without the weight of crests or heirlooms, its band etched with intertwined vines, a symbol fresh and unburdened by the past. "This is for us," he murmured, slipping the hawthorn locket from her throat with gentle fingers, replacing it with the ring on a slender chain. "A new beginning. Wear it close, as you did your father's gift. But this one, it's ours alone." The ritual unfolded in the library's sunlit hush, away from prying eyes, a vow renewed by choice, not contract. Edward drew her into his arms, the embrace firm yet tender, his lips brushing her forehead in a kiss that spoke of alliance forged in fire. No grand ceremony, just the press of his mouth to hers, soft and searching, sealing their bond with the taste of promise. Eleanor leaned into him, her heart steady at last. The chill of fear melted away. They were partners now, voices united in compassion, her insight tempering his resolve, his strength bolstering her grace. Word of their triumph spread, drawing coadjuvantes into the light. Mr. Ellis received a parcel of estate shares, his loyalty rewarded with a modest cottage on the grounds for his growing family. The vicar, Reverend Hargrove, who had witnessed Amelia's will, penned a letter of gratitude. His neutral stance in the fray now repositioned as firm ally, invited to weekly suppers at the manor. Even old Mrs. Greer from Willowbrook arrived with a basket of scones, her pitying glances replaced by respectful nods. Clara, blooming under the secured portion, chattered of a London season, while their mother settled into a refurbished dower house on the grounds, her lines easing with quiet contentment. Edward led Eleanor to the manor's east wing that afternoon, a space long shuttered, dusty shelves and faded maps gathering cobwebs. "Amelia dreamed of this," he said, flinging open the doors to reveal carpenters already at work, hammers ringing like hopeful bells. "A legacy not of stone, but of knowledge. We'll transform it into a lending library for the tenants, books on farming, poetry for the children, even a small schoolroom. Your touch will guide it, Eleanor. Gardens outside, perhaps, with benches for reading under the oaks." She envisioned it, villagers gathering, children with slates and primers, the estate's walls opening to nurture rather than hoard. Her leadership took shape here, plans sketched over tea, her suggestions for women's reading circles met with Edward's approving smile. The new equilibrium settled gently. Ashford Manor no longer a fortress, but a heart beating for the community. Debts erased, scandals faded, their status quo one of shared purpose, where love bloomed not in isolation, but in action. As dusk painted the hills in amber, they walked the renewed gardens, the old oak at the boundary now a marker of victory rather than peril. Edward halted by a stone bench, overlooking the valley where Willowbrook nestled like a contented dream. "This is our horizon," he said, his arm around her waist, their silhouettes framed against the setting sun. The kiss that followed was deeper, born of free choice, a horizon stretching toward family. Perhaps children laughing in these very gardens, a legacy woven from trials into tapestry. Yet, as stars pricked the twilight, a soft rustle drew their gaze. A lone rider approaching the manor gates, bearing a sealed letter from London. Edward's brow furrowed slightly. An old acquaintance, perhaps, or news from the capital. Eleanor squeezed his hand, untroubled. Whatever came, they faced it as one, bound by truth, ready for the chapters yet unwritten. 5 years had woven their gentle threads through the tapestry of Ashford Manor, transforming the once shadowed halls into a haven of light and laughter. The Cotswolds hills rolled unchanged under vast skies, but the estate pulsed with new life, its honeystone facade warmed by climbing roses that Eleanor had planted herself. She stood now in the East Wing library, her hand resting on the swell of her belly, her third child quickening within, a promise of continuation. At 26, her chestnut curls framed a face softened by joy, though the storm-tossed seas of her eyes held echoes of trials long past. The round gown of sprigged muslin draped her figure, its high waist accommodating the gentle curve, a far cry from the borrowed ivory of her wedding day. Edward approached from the garden door, his broad shoulders filling the frame, the lines of command eased by contentment. 35 now, his raven hair threaded with silver at the temples, the scar on his jaw a faint reminder of battles won. He carried their eldest, young Amelia, named for the lost Marchioness, perched on his hip, the 4-year-old's laughter bubbling as she tugged at his cravat. "Papa, tell the story again, the fox and the oak." He chuckled, a deep, resonant sound that filled the room like sunlight, setting the child down amid the shelves lined with volumes on agriculture, poetry, and natural philosophy. He knelt to her level. "Later, little one, the library awaits your mother's voice today." The space Amelia had dreamed of now thrived. Tenants borrowed books freely, children gathered for lessons under Eleanor's guidance, their slates scratching with eager marks. Gardens bloomed beyond the windows, benches under the old oak, where villagers read aloud on summer eves. The air scented with lavender and turning pages. Eleanor smiled, drawing Edward close as the children scampered to join a group of village lads poring over a map of the stars. Their second, Henry, toddled after at 2, his chubby fists clutching a wooden horse carved by Mr. Ellis. The steward, greying but steadfast, oversaw the expanded schoolroom now, his own family woven into the manor's rhythm, a reward that had bloomed into generations of loyalty. "Look at them," Eleanor murmured, leaning into Edward's side, his arm encircling her waist with familiar ease. "Our legacy, alive and growing." He pressed a kiss to her temple, his breath warm against her skin. "Ours, yes, but born of your courage that night in the hall." Nostalgia tugged at them both, the memory vivid as yesterday's rain. The assembly's cheers, Reginald's fall, those moments had forged not just justice, but their unbreakable bond. Love had resisted time's gentle erosion, deepening like roots in fertile soil. No longer a contract of duty, their union flowered in quiet intimacies, shared rides across the meadows at dawn, evenings by the hearth debating estate reforms, nights where whispers turned to tender embraces, free of shadows. The Hargraves had paid dearly for their greed. Reginald lingered in obscurity, a diminished figure in a cramped London garret, his health broken by disgrace and mounting debts. Greystone Hall stood empty, its gardens overgrown, sold at auction to fund reparations that bolstered Ashford's coffers. Lady Beatrice had retreated to a distant cousin's care, her venom spent in bitter solitude, whispers of her passing 2 winters past, unmourned. Even Wilkins, the false witness, had faced the assize's judgment. Transported to the colonies for perjury, his family left to quiet shame in Willowbrook. Justice's price had been exacted. A cautionary tale murmured in taverns. Ambition unchecked devours its bearer. Eleanor's family had flourished in the wake. Her mother tended the dower house with serene pride, her hands now idle from mending, occupied instead with grandchildren's tales. Clara, wed to a kindly vicar in a neighbouring parish, visited often, her own babe in arms, a circle completed, debts forgotten like autumn leaves. Reverend Hargrove, elevated to canon for his steadfast witness, preached sermons on truth's triumph, his pews filled with those once neutral, now allies bound by gratitude. Edward guided her to the window seat, the valley unfolding below. Willowbrook's golden cottages nestled amid green folds, sheep grazing under watchful shepherds. "Do you ever miss the simplicity?" he asked, his voice soft, laced with the weight of what they'd endured. She turned to him, fingers intertwining with his, the gold ring on its chain cool against her skin, a talisman of choice, worn always. The simplicity was illusion, bound by fear. This. She gestured to the library's hum, the children's voices rising in a chorus of discovery, a maid shelving new arrivals from London presses. "This is freedom. Our love, tested in fire, endures because we chose it day by day." Tears glistened in her eyes, not of sorrow, but profound gratitude. He drew her closer, their foreheads touching, the world narrowing to this moment. Outside, the old oak rustled, its branches a canopy over the future. More children to come, perhaps a daughter with Edward's dark eyes, a son inheriting Eleanor's resolve. The letter from London, years ago, had borne only tidings of distant kin, no threat, just an invitation declined. Peace had held, their horizon vast and unclouded. As the sun dipped toward the hills, painting the scene in amber glow, Edward whispered, "To us, Eleanor, forever." Their lips met in a kiss slow and sure, sealing the epilogue of trials into an eternal now. The manor sighed around them, content, its legacy a living flame, love's quiet victory echoing through the ages. As the echoes of Eleanor and Edward's story fade into the golden haze of that Cotswold sunset, we find ourselves lingering on the manor steps, hearts full from a tale that began in dread and bloomed into unbreakable love. What started as a marriage forged in desperation, debts pressing like storm clouds, secrets buried deeper than ancient oaks, unraveled into a testament to courage, trust, and the quiet power of choosing one another amid chaos. Eleanor, once a trembling bride facing a loveless knight, emerged not just as a marchioness, but as a force who wielded truth like a sword, toppling greed and restoring honor to Ashford. Think on the lessons woven through their journey. First, that duty need not chain the soul. It can be reshaped by resolve, turning obligation into alliance. Eleanor's stand in the village hall reminds us that even in the face of public scorn, one voice, steady and true, can shift the winds of fate. Edward's guarded heart teaches that grief's armor cracks under compassion's touch, revealing vulnerability as strength, not weakness. And together, they show how love, when earned through trials, endures beyond titles or estates, rooting deep in shared purpose and gentle choices. In our own lives, we all face those crossroads, a choice that feels like surrender, a secret that threatens to unravel everything. Let Eleanor's story inspire you to seek the hidden truths, to stand firm against the Reginalds of the world, those who twist ambition into cruelty. Embrace the pikes of empathy that connect us, the indignation that fuels justice, and the euphoria of hard-won victory. You have the power to rewrite your narrative just as they did, from fear to forever. Now, dear listener, as this Regency romance draws to a close, I invite you to share your thoughts in the comments below. What moved you most, Eleanor's bravery, Edward's quiet revelation, or the sweet triumph of their bond? To show you've journeyed to the end with us, write the word oak in your comment. It's our secret signal for those true fans who savored every twist. Your words help spread these stories far and wide, building our community one heartfelt reply at a time. If this tale of hidden reasons and heartfelt revelations left you yearning for more, check out the cards below for similar narratives, grand estates, whispered secrets, and loves that defy the odds. Hit play on another adventure, and remember, every great story starts with a single, courageous step. Thank you for joining me. Until next time, may your own horizons shine as brightly as Ashford's.